Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host tonight, Matt Flipovitz, joined by my phenomenal co-host, Mr. Bill DeFilippo. Bill, are you excited to talk about Penn State playing what you just told me was the second worst team in Power 4, according to SP+?
Yes, because I am out of town this weekend. I have to, longtime listeners of the pod, and that and me people who listened to our last episode will know I spent last weekend at a wedding. I'm also spending this upcoming weekend at a wedding. So Penn State playing a very chill, mellow game on what should be a very chill, mellow game on Saturday makes my life considerably easier.
So we are talking about the UCLA Bruins coming to town. I believe their first trip to Happy Valley, maybe ever. If not, it's been at least a half of a century since the Bruins have last come to State College. UCLA, new member to the Big Ten. It is their Penn State's first chance to play one of the four new members of the Big Ten, which I'm pretty excited about. Coached by Deshaun Foster, who takes over for Chip Kelly, who is now Ohio State's offensive coordinator. And it's been a year. The Bruins are 1-3 with a win at Hawaii on the islands, yet to win on the mainland, with losses to Indiana, LSU, and Oregon. So it has been a hell of a run for the Bruins here. The Nittany Lions are about a 3 touchdown and a field goal favorite, 24.5, 23.5, depending on where you look. Bill, give me your 10,000 foot view of this game. This feels like the kind of game that, first of all, I cannot believe Big Noon Kickoff, the pregame show, is going to be at this game. It kind of just tells you the state of the Big Ten this week specifically. But Bill, I think Penn State should come out there, learn a lot from the mistakes they made against Illinois, and I think kind of coast to a nice little win here before the really hard part of the schedule ramps up with USC coming down the pipe next week.
Yeah, so to answer your question from earlier, Penn State and UCLA have played 6 times in history. UCLA with 4 wins. They played every year from 1963 to 1968. Penn State won the 1963 matchup when Rip Engel was the Nittany Lions coach. 64, that was in State College. 64 was in Los Angeles. UCLA won that. 65, UCLA won a matchup at State College. 66, that was Joe Paterno's first year at Penn State. Went out to UCLA, and the most lopsided game that the two teams have played, UCLA won that one 49-11, 1967 in State College. UCLA won 17-15 in their most recent matchup, the one in 1968. Penn State won that game 21-6. Have not played since then. And for this game in particular, you throw the record books out, it's all about the history between these two teams. Those 6 games that they played in the 1960s really left a mark on people. I'm going to say this is an unfortunate game because UCLA should not have been this bad this year. I'm sure if you're listening, you are acutely aware of the number of dominoes that had to fall for UCLA to get to this spot. First off, Bill O'Brien had to show that he's wanted to go back to being a coach in college football when he took the offense coordinator job at Ohio State, or he wanted to return to college football in general when he took the offense coordinator job at Ohio State. Not long after that, Jeff Hafley, the head coach at Boston College, left to become the defense coordinator of the Green Bay Packers, and O'Brien immediately became a high-profile candidate for that job. He left for that. Ryan Day decided to lean on to try and hire someone with whom he had plenty of experience. Day was a member of Chip Kelly's staffs in New Hampshire, Philadelphia, with the Philadelphia Eagles and with the San Francisco 49ers, and he decided he wanted to make Chip Kelly, who was at the time UCLA's head coach, his offensive coordinator. Kelly left on February 9th to take
That's
the
so
job.
late.
And when you were looking for a new football coach on February 9th, that's just a brutal, brutal place to be. UCLA ended up going with Deshaun Foster, who was an excellent running back for them back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Spent a lot of his coaching career on staff there from 2017 to 2023. He was their running backs coach. They decided to just promote him while going through everything that they had to go through. They decided to just stick with some level of continuity. There was a lot of problems under Chip Kelly in general during his final couple of years there, even as they went 8-4, 9-4, 8-5 over the last 3 years. It really felt like things were atrophying with that program, and there was no bigger way to recruiting. Last year, UCLA, or the 2024 class, UCLA brought in the 17th recruiting class in the Big Ten out of all 17 teams, and had the number 68 class in the country with 12 commits in it. They had to hit the portal hard. They brought in 20 new players from the portal. So all of that is to say this. Even before this game, like this game could have been, if it was just a respectable UCLA team, if it was a top 50 and SP plus UCLA team, this game would feel a lot different. Instead, we'll have to see what happens when the game actually starts, but this looks like a game that Penn State should be able to go in and win pretty comfortably without breaking a sweat against a team that, not exactly like Kent State by any stretch of the imagination, but their last 4 games have been against a top 25 Indiana team, a top 25 LSU team, a top 25 Oregon team, and now a top 25 Penn State team. A brutal schedule for a team that doesn't have a lot of talent, that is going through a period of major transition. As a result, this really does look like a game that Penn State should be able to win with some level of comfort.
And, you made the Kent State point. Bill, I was going to bring this up later, but it feels like a good segue to talk about it now. UCLA is averaging 57 yards per game on the ground. Like, that feels made up. Granted, a lot of those have been sack yardage. They've allowed 12 sacks already against, is it Chase Garbers, not Ethan Garbers? Ethan Garbers, excuse me. Ethan Garbers. Chase is his brother. Bill, that's the second worst in America. It's ahead of Akron and behind Kent State. Like, it's bad for UCLA. So this is a game Penn State should win comfortably. One thing that I think is pretty exciting is that Penn State has made it through their non-conference, really only playing the young guys, like those true freshmen who they're looking to redshirt, in one game, the Kent State game, because Bowling Green was way too close for comfort. So now you get an extra game in the Big Ten, where guys have had a couple more weeks to develop. You can maybe get a better idea of what they can offer your football program in the immediacy. So that's one thing I'm pretty excited to watch is all these young guys who I hope can get in this game pretty early. But Bill, before we get to, talking about this game being a blowout, which I think both you and I do expect this to be, let's talk about how the Penn State offense should attack the UCLA defense. The UCLA defense is allowing 291 passing yards per game. Bill, that's the worst in the Power Four. For a Penn State passing attack that has gotten a lot better this year, this feels like a great confidence builder against a Power 4 opponent. Kent State was a great confidence builder for a lot of guys. I think there's a lot that they can build upon from that game. But for Drew Aller, Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Julian Fleming, not having their best game last week against Illinois, this feels like a great bounce back spot to put a lot of very interesting things on tape for upcoming defenses, because I think they can get a lot of guys involved in unique ways.
Yeah, the interesting thing about UCLA's defense is that they are actually not too terrible against the run. They are averaging 3.5 yards allowed per rush, which is 32nd nationally. And as a result, like, I don't know if Penn State is going to necessarily want to follow a similar game plan to what it did last week, where it was a lot of Katron Allen, it was a lot of Nick Singleton. If you're throwing the football, you're not throwing it way down the field. Because when you look at what this UCLA team is, they're not a team that's especially great against the pass. They're not a team that's especially great at keeping teams out of the end zone. They're allowing 30.8 points per game, which is 89th nationally. They are sacking quarterbacks on about 3% of dropbacks, which is 116th nationally. And the average opponent passer rating for them is 149.7, which is 102nd nationally. All of this adds up to a defense that they do one thing, like their ability to stop teams from running the football is legitimately pretty impressive. Or their ability to bottle up rushing attacks on a down-to-down basis is pretty impressive.
100%.
Because Indiana ran for 4.2 yards per rush. Against LSU ran for 3.6 yards per rush. Against Oregon ran for 4.3 yards per rush. You expect teams that aren't very good to be bad against the run. UCLA is going to allow you. They have a big fella right in the heart of their defense. Who I forgot to jot his name now. I'll pull it up here in a second. Jay Toya, who is a defensive tackle. He is 6'3", 325 pounds. Load right in the middle of the offensive line. However, because they don't get two quarterbacks, UCLA is 133rd nationally in third down percentage. They allow opponents to convert 57.14% of their third downs,
which is crazy.
As I look,
if you think about a team that stops the run, those should be third and intermediate, third and long in theory. If you're not allowing a ton of rushing yardage, that's the most insane part of this defense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you look at this game, this is a game where after a game last week where he just didn't quite have his very best, fewest yards that he's thrown for this season by some margin. It was the first game all year where Penn State didn't have a receiver go over 100 yards. Their top receiver was Trey Wallace with 38 yards. This is a game to get Drew Aller going. This is a game to get Drew Aller some of those in rhythm throws, some of those throws down the field that we saw him make at the beginning of this season and are going to be necessary and critical if Penn State is going to get through that USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State part of the schedule with one or fewer losses. So I'm expecting a big game out of Drew Aller. I'm expecting them to emphasize a big game out of Drew Aller. Partially, like you mentioned, Matt, so they could put stuff on tape for this next stretch, but also when you look at what UCLA is good at, when you look at what Penn State is good at, and you look at what Penn State needs to work on, and you look at what UCLA is bad at also, this game just lends itself to, this is going to be a Drew game. The last game was a Katron and Nick game. The game before that, that was a Drew game. That was kind of an entire offense game. The game before that was a Tyler Warren game. This game is about how we can get Drew Aller playing his absolute best football heading into October 12th when we have to go to USC.
And you rattle off all those offenses and ranked teams in Indiana, LSU, and Oregon. All good teams. None of those teams run the ball particularly well or nearly as good as Penn State. Those are pass-heavy offenses. That's what they want to do. I mean, Oregon kind of is, but with Dylan Gabriel, a sixth-year quarterback, they're going to sling it around more than Penn State would with Drew Aller. That's just how that offense is going to run. So I am curious to see, how they want to handle the ability to attack them with their 1-2 punch with Singleton and Allen, but also Singleton, it sounds like, wasn't at practice tonight on Wednesday as we record this. Singleton did get a little bit banged up towards the end of last week. I think he's going to play. I have no reason not to. It doesn't seem like anything serious, more like bumps and bruises. But with Cam Wallace out now, and with a clear desire to still redshirt Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, this might not be the worst idea to go air raid, or essentially as air raidy as Andy Kotelnicki is comfortable being. So I'm excited to watch how those guys go out there and get the job done when they're called upon. But it's those secondary pieces as pass catchers that have me really intrigued. That's Luke Reynolds, Liam Clifford, Julian Fleming. I think it's going to be a big week for those guys to really start to figure out what their role is going to be. It's crazy to say, Bill, we're a third of the way through the season already. At this point, we can start saying what Penn State is, not, I think Penn State is going to be this. We have to start making these generalizations now because we have enough data. And frankly, we just won't get all that many more opportunities to decide what a team is just yet. So a lot of roles, I think, are up for grabs. And this Penn State offensive line, I think, played such a phenomenal game against Illinois. Like Drew Shelton, especially, I was fawning over on our recap podcast a couple of days ago. So I'm looking for those guys to go out there and dominate up front once again, especially in pass protection. Give Drew a lot of time, let those deep and intermediate throws develop, and let the kid with the 5-star arm go out there and really air it out and spread the ball around and make, other teams have to respect Drew's ability to chuck it deep. So, Bill, give me a guy on offense you're watching. You can pick whoever you want. I won't limit it to, you can pick a star if you want to, but when you think about this matchup, when you watch UCLA, when you look at all the stats, who's a guy that you're going to be watching pretty closely to see how they're playing before the biggest stretch of the year?
I mean, Drew is the obvious answer. Drew is the easy
Yep.
answer because Penn State needs him to be at his very best. But I'll go with Trey Wallace because he's the other guy Penn State needs to be at his very best. I mean, if I told you after his first game against West Virginia that he was going to be second on the team in receptions, third in receiving yards, and tied with three other guys for tops and touchdowns, and like you would have probably been surprised by that. And I certainly get and I certainly understand the fact that there are four guys who could be Penn State's best receiver on a given day in Tyler Warren, Amari Evans, Trey Wallace, and to a lesser extent, Nick Singleton. But the Daniel Jeremiah definition of a wide receiver one is on a third down and long, everyone in the building knows who the ball is getting thrown to, and it doesn't matter. Trey Wallace is Penn State's best chance at having a guy who can make a play and make it so it doesn't matter that everybody in the building can go out and make a play. I think this is one of those games where it would be really good if Penn State was able to get hit. I don't need him to have one of those games where, he's catching 8 balls for 185 yards or anything like that. But you look at some of the teams that UCLA has played this season. Indiana's top receiver against them, 690 and a touchdown. LSU's top receiver against them was a tight end, but their top wide receiver on the day, 675, no touchdowns, but still six catches for 75 yards. Oregon, 11 receptions, 121 yards, 2 touchdowns. They are a team that will let you get the ball to your top receiver. Your top receiver can win against their secondary. I think this is, for everything I said about Drew, I think this is also a game where you can let Trey catch a few balls, find a little bit of success, and build up a little bit of momentum heading into a stretch of the season where if he has 3 straight bad games, that's a huge, huge problem for Penn State in 3 games that they're going, they have a real shot at winning if they could have that option on the outside who can make big plays for them.
Trey Wallace is a great answer here, and I think it's the one who I think most people are going to be able to notice if he has a big productive game. Bill, I'm going with Nick Dawkins here for me, and you called out a big reason why. Jay Toia is a very, very good defensive tackle. That, I think, is the best interior defensive lineman that the Penn State front has seen all year long. And if Nick Dawkins, who has played a lot better than I thought he was going to, but if Nick Dawkins is going to go out there and prove he can hold up against what Ohio State has coming down the pipe in a couple of weeks, this is the kind of game where he can prove he can play with the best of the best in the Big Ten. So Nick Dawkins is a guy, especially when it comes to pass pro, who I'm really going to have an eye on. Again, I get that the UCLA defensive front doesn't get a ton of pressure, but Ohio State's going to be able to. So this is, I think, the best shot we're going to have to see how Nick Dawkins can hold up in those kind of environments. So give me the 5th-year senior who's getting, his first chance to really start, to really continue to build upon what's been a solid beginning to his senior season. So Dawkins is a guy I'm pretty excited to watch. And Bill, I'm going to a bar for this game. I'm very excited about it. It's supposed to be a beautiful day here in Chicago, like 74 and sunny in October is the dream. I'm excited about it. And every time I go to one of these bars, the alumni sponsored bars here in Chicago, I'm always rocking home field apparel, and it's always cool to see other folks there wearing their home field apparel gear too. Home field apparel makes some of the coolest collegiate apparel in the marketplace today. Crew necks, hoodies, bomber jackets, coaches jackets. They're dropping pullovers very soon. And they really take the time to learn about your school. They're going to go out there and they're going to find unique logos. They're going to find a way to make your Penn State or any college team gear stand out. And our listeners can get 15% off their first order with promo code RLR24. Holidays are coming up. It's a great chance to get something special for the college sports fan in your life. And I wear home field all the time, even when I'm not going to a Penn State bar. Just when I'm out, I have other schools, not just Penn State. I have a Louisville basketball shirt because their stuff is just that comfortable. So again, it's promo code RLR24 for 15% off your first order. Thank you to Home Field for sponsoring this podcast. And Bill, Penn State defense should continue to play at a high level, I think, against this type of opponent. UCLA's offense, not that impressive. I have their numbers pulled up right here. They are averaging 205 passing yards per game, which is tied for number 89th nationally. I already gave you the rushing number, second worst in America, ahead of only Akron. Sorry, Joe Moorhead. And behind Kent State. And they're averaging, Bill, 14.8 points per game. It has not been a good start for the Bruins on offense.
Yeah, I'm going to actually take all of this a bit of a step further. UCLA is 98th nationally in offensive SP plus points per game. They're 117th nationally with 14.8 points per game. You mentioned their numbers on a total game basis, Matt, and I like going with per play numbers because I think that's a better representation of what they do down to down. What stop. When you're in the fourth quarter of a blowout, you can maybe pick up some cheap, easy yards, whatever. Yards per play, they're 106th nationally with 4.6. Third down percentage, 114th nationally, converting 27.91% of their third downs.
That's bad.
Yards per rush, 125th nationally at 2.5 yards per rush. Their quarterback gets sacked 100 and quarterback sack percentage 110th nationally at 8.96% of dropbacks. Yards per pass 86th nationally at 6.7 yards per pass. However, an important bit of context for this game is that their starting quarterback Ethan Garbers, who has been sacked 12 times this season, is a guy who played a bit last year, was knocked out of last week's game with an injury. And Deshaun Foster, our buddy Greg Pickle over at BWY, ended up going through his press availability today and published this. This is Deshaun Foster on their quarterback situation. We're able to get Justin Martin a couple more reps at practice. Ethan took a lot of just mental reps today. Hopefully we'll see what he could do on Thursday. Now, I don't know anything about anything, but I would assume if you're taking mental reps on Wednesday before a football game, you're probably not going to play. And instead, Justin Martin is going to be the guy who ends up stepping in under center for UCLA. Martin has thrown 5 passes in his entire career, all of them this year. He is 2 for 5 for 12 yards. His first start is probably going to be a road game in Happy Valley behind an offensive line that gets their quarterback sacked a lot with no running game to help him. And with the passing game that while they have a couple of nice players at receiver and at tight end, we're not exactly talking about a Mike Leach Texas Tech offense here. So for everything that we said about UCLA's defense, how, they got this, they got this, this might be the worst offense outside of Kent State that Penn State faces all season.
Yeah, it's bad. You made all those comments about everything that's going to be stacked up against Justin Martin. Also, keep in mind, Bill, this game's a noon kick on the East Coast. Bill, that's 9 a.m. for these kids. That sucks. Mm-hmm. That is really tough to get up for, especially, it's game 4 of 4 in a row for Penn State at home. I do think it's going to be a little bit empty in the stands, but still a good crowd. I mean, they're still going to break 95K. I feel confident in that.
Yeah, and Franklin did say, he just said this at practice, that their expectation is that their prep is for Garbers in case he's able to play, but if not, they went back and watched the high school film for Justin Martin to make sure that if they do end up having to play him, they at least have some some kind of an understanding of what they're going to get. Martin was a 4-star quarterback recruit back in the class of 2022.
And if Garbers is able to go, just to get that out there, his stats 67 for 117 yards. 67 for 117, 808 yards. That's about a 57.3 completion percentage, 6.9 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 6 picks. And again, he's been sacked 12 times. So not exactly the 2 best options for you. Bill, the UCLA running game is also not great at all. Like total through 4 games, they have 228 yards and they've scored 1 rushing touchdown. It came from starting running back TJ Harden. But Bill, 1 touchdown total for your entire offense rushing the football. Tyler Warren has more than that. Or I think at least, no, he has more than that. Yeah, he has 2 of them now, I think. Bill, that's not good. This is a defensive front for Penn State that should be able to feast, stuff the run, get UCLA in 3rd and longs, where, again, they do have some decent pass catchers. Rico Flores Jr., 12 catches, 187 yards, 15.6 yards per catch. It's pretty good. 1 touchdown. There are guys there that can make a couple of plays. But again, these quarterbacks are a little bit turnover. Martin, we don't know yet, but you have to imagine there's going to be some turnovers in a young kid. Bill, this feels like the kind of game where the Penn State defense can really dominate up front, get UCLA behind the sticks, and get multiple turnovers. I feel very, very good about those chances.
Yeah, and mentioned how UCLA isn't very good at keeping their quarterbacks upright. Again, Garbers has been sacked 12 times this season. They're allowing sacks on about 9% of their dropbacks. Their top running back, like you mentioned, is TJ Harden. In 2022, his first year playing, he averaged 7.4 yards per rush, had 2 total touchdowns. 2023, last year, 5.3 yards per rush, 8 touchdowns. 2024, this year, 3 yards per rush and a touchdown. So one of 2 things has happened. Either A, as TJ Harden has gone along in his college football career and gained experience, gotten reps, all these sorts of things, he has become a markedly worse football player. Or UCLA's offensive line is terrible. I am inclined to go with UCLA's offensive line is pretty terrible. And I think that bodes well for a Penn State defensive front that has come under a bit of fire over the course of this season. Hasn't always, came under a bit of criticism the first 3 games for not being able to get to the quarterback, but is coming off of a game where it had 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, held Illinois to 1.1 yards per rush, yards per attempt. Of course, obviously, with those 7 sacks factors into it. So this is an opportunity for Penn State's defensive line to continue to build on what was a really successful performance last week against an opponent that they should be able to overwhelm, build up a bit of confidence, puff their chests out a bit before next week when things start to get very, very real for them.
There's 2 guys, Bill, for the Penn State defense I'm watching very closely in this one. And that's Dakari Nelson, who, again, got the start at linebacker for Penn State last week. It does sound like Dom DeLuca could go. He was at practice tonight, which is always a good sign. But if he can rest up another week, I'm totally fine with that. So Dakari Nelson at the second level is a guy I really want to watch fly around. And then the other one is Dejon Lane. This is a kid who Penn State needs to get up to speed very quickly for Jalen Reed to go back to the Lion role. And last week against Illinois, we saw how valuable Jalen Reed can be when he can play that Lion role, when he can get behind the line of scrimmage, when he can cause chaos in the backfield. If the staff feels confident in Dejon Lane to just play deep with Zakee Wheatley, I really like what that will mean for the future of Penn State's defense and getting back to what we all thought this unit could be when KJ Winston was healthy. So those are 2 guys who I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. Another one is going to be Zane Durant, because I do think he is quickly playing his way into like early day 2 NFL draft stuff. And depending on how he tests, who knows where he goes from there. So that's one guy at each level I'm really excited to watch. Bill, anybody in this game for Penn State that you're really excited to watch play football?
This is a bit of a cop-out, but it's less any individual guys and more I want to see how Penn State handles this game, because I think this has the potential to be a game where what you lost in the Bowling Green game in being able to rotate guys in and being able to get a ton of guys snaps and being able to get guys opportunities to play against Bowling Green later in the game because it was out of hand, whatever. You should be able to get that here.
Yep.
You should be able to have be in a really good place by midway through the third quarter, by the start of the fourth quarter, whatever. And if you have that, does James Franklin then, well, not even does he wait till that point? Are they doing a ton of rotation? And this does apply for both sides of the football. Are they doing a ton of rotation before this game is completely out of hand? Are they, getting a lot of reps for a guy like Alonzo Ford, a guy like Smith Vilbert, a guy like Takari Nelson, like, DeJuan Wayne's a little bit different, but like some of the guys a little bit farther down the cornerback depth chart? How do they approach this game from that perspective? Are they going to basically say, we're just going to try and run it up over the first two and a half quarters and then just make mass subs and let specific guys get a quarter and a half of run? Or are they going to say something like, okay, we want to be able to get Dakari in there with Tony and with Kobe, or we want to be able to get Zion Tracy run at cornerback when the other three guys in the secondary are all guys that, it's AJ Harris, it's Zaki Wheatley, it's Jalen Reed. How they handle that just generally has me interested. I would certainly like it if Penn State approached this game with a ton of urgency, approached it with a desire to run up the score, and approached it with an interest in going, you're just not going to be in this football game at any point. But I wouldn't be stunned with what we know about James Franklin if he tries to use this game as a chance to get a lot of young guys opportunities and reps on both sides of the football with the ones throughout the game.
One place I don't want to see, those rotational pieces start subbing in is that first drive. Penn State needs to figure out their problem with getting off the field on scripted drives against opposing teams. So I want to see that first drive. They come out there, they really get aggressive. They make a couple of plays behind the line of scrimmage and get off the field without allowing a score on that first drive. That's a space I'm going to be watching very closely. I think that first drive is going to tell us a lot about what Tom Allen and this defense have been working on for the past week. Because again, it's now multiple games where that opening drive for teams has been a big problem for the Penn State defense. So that's a space I'm watching pretty tightly. Bill, there's really not much else we can say about this game. I think you and I really are feeling pretty confident in it. So Bill, give me one bold prediction on offense, one bold prediction on defense, and give me your score prediction. I can go first, too, if you'd like.
Bold prediction on offense. Let's see. Okay. Bold prediction on offense. This is the first time we see Drew Allar throw for 400 yards.
Wow. Okay.
You wanted bold.
I like it. I love it.
I'm going to oblige you. I think this game is just going to really lend itself, especially depending on what ends up happening with Nick Singleton. I think he's going to play. I would assume he's just getting a day off. We'll find it. Franklin didn't have an answer during the press availability. Whatever. I think this game just really lends itself to letting Drew Allar run it up, build up more reps and more chemistry with his various pass catchers. And as a result, first 400-yard game. Bold prediction on defense. The Penn State defense recovers 3 fumbles because UCLA is putting a guy who has never played quarterback back there behind a terrible offensive line, and Penn State's defensive front is just going to eat them up.
I like both those. You want me to give mine, or you want to do score prediction?
Yeah, go ahead and give yours.
Mine is 2 Nittany Lions will score their first touchdown as Nittany Lions, and put me down for Julian Fleming to find the end zone and for Quentin Martin to find the end zone. I think we're going to see a lot of Quentin Martin in this game. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do. Again, I still think a redshirt's best for him. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe even Corey Smith is the guy, because I know Franklin's talked about wanting to rotate those guys to preserve redshirts for both those guys. I think Quentin Martin, he's only had one game so far through 4 games. So I think that's a guy is going to find the end zone. And then defensively, we see our first defensive score this year for Penn State that's going to stand. I think Penn State's defense finds the end zone again against what I think is an offense that's going to put the ball on the turf a couple of times. Bill, score prediction. I'll go first. I have Penn State winning this one fairly comfortably. Penn State 45, UCLA 13 is where I'm planting my flag. I have them covering that spread. I threw the 45 in there because I do think it's important that this team tries to kick a field goal with whoever it might be. So I think Penn State wins this one pretty comfortably.
I think that's a pretty reasonable prediction. Something that you did mention that I wanted to make sure that I'm glad you did, and I wanted to make sure that we mentioned is the fact that UCLA is a West Coast team traveling to the East Coast for an early kick. I know research has been done on this in the NFL and or with NFL teams. Obviously, we're so new into this being a conference thing in college football that we don't know. I don't have the exact numbers, but I want to say the number is something like 40 to 45% of West Coast teams that travel from west to east for an early kick cover the spread. That's just covering the spread. That is not outright winning the game. So Penn State is a 27.5-point favorite. I think they should win this game by more. Bill Connolly has Penn State winning this game 40-9. So he has that, he has the spread by SP Plus at about 32 points. I'm going to say the one thing that I do think UCLA has is their kicker, Mateen Bagani, is very good. He went 8 for 9 last year at Cal. He is so far 8 for 9 this year at UCLA with a long of 54 yards and has not missed a PAT in his career. He is 33 for 33. I'm going to say Penn State wins this game 48-6. Like you mentioned, I think that it's going to be important to get presumably Ryan Barker or Chase Meyer, whichever kicker it ends up being, opportunities to see if you go through. Not to say that I think Penn State is going to specifically try to kick field goals, but I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. And then if UCLA is able to get the ball into Penn State territory, they have a kicker who could put points on the board. So I will say Penn State 48, UCLA 6.
I just double checked to confirm, Bill. There is no Penn State connection on the UCLA coaching staff. I don't see any former players listed as any assistant coaches, nor as any GAs. But do you know who the OC is for UCLA? I forgot about this. It's
Who is
Eric
it?
Bieniemy.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
nice.
Yeah, good for him. That's after being in Kansas City and Washington to spend some time in Southern California in what I'm guessing is a lower stress job. That's got to be pretty nice. Anything
that does seem nice.
Anything in the Big Ten, catch your eye this week? We got Michigan State, Oregon on a Friday night, Iowa, Ohio State on CBS right after Penn State's game, USC, Minnesota. USC has to travel to Minnesota before coming back home to play Penn State. Anything there catch your eye?
Washington being a 2.5-point favorite over Michigan is very
that has the
fun.
chance to be hilarious, Bill. The team that lost to Rutgers coming back and beating the reigning national title champions and a top 10 team. That'd be great.
In a rematch of the national championship
game. That's
true.
Yeah,
I mean, I would certainly like it if Minnesota could really take USC to the woodshed and have them going into next week in sour moods. But I'm not going to But I'm not going to get my hopes up. This week sucks. This is not a fun week in college
Rutgers,
football.
Nebraska is pretty good.
I'm not. No, it's not. I don't want to watch any of that. I'm very happy that I get to spend this weekend doing something other than watching college football.
Fair enough, because next week, the 12th, is a banger day. So I'm sure you and I are both excited about that.
Yeah.
Bill, anything else you want to talk about before we send the folks off into their weekend? If you're heading to the game, travel safe. Looks like another beautiful day in State College. Enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. Can't think of anything this week. And fortunately, it's nice knowing, maybe we end up being wrong here, but it's nice knowing that Penn State should have a pretty uh a pretty good afternoon facing them on
Yeah,
Saturday.
fingers crossed for a nice little Penn State win. I hope we get to see a lot of walk-ons and young guys get involved. Again, you never want to overlook any opponent, but it's not it for UCLA right now. And who knows where they'll go from there. So tough spot to be in for Deshaun Foster's program. So yeah, Bill, we'll kind of just call it there. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, whatever the term is on YouTube. I don't know offhand. Comment on the video, talk about the game with other Penn State fans. If you're a UCLA fan, traveling to Happy Valley for the first time, enjoy the game, enjoy State College. It's great. I cannot wait to return the favor one day and get out of somewhere cold and go somewhere warm pretty soon. Thank you to Homefield for sponsoring this podcast. Again, it's RLR24 for 15% off your first order. Follow us on Twitter over at RLRblog. Bill and I are always tweeting dumb stuff throughout the course of a college football Saturday. With Bill at the wedding, it's probably going to be a lot of me on there. So get ready for bad jokes and a lot of Tyler Warren content. So for my co-host, Bill DeFilippo, I'm Matt Filipowitz. Take care, everyone, and go State.